Hello and welcome to Strategic News International. I'm Parul Chandra and with me is Surya Gangadharan, the editor of SNI. And we're going to be talking about the meeting of the Quad, which is taking place for the first time at the ministerial level. Now, this is very significant, Surya. And what do you make of this? Because so far the meeting has been held only at an official level, at the Joint Secretary level.
I think it's an important in terms of messaging, the signals going out to China about perhaps a new renewed thinking among them that the issues with China are getting more complex and there needs to be a greater synergy at a higher level, ministerial level, at the political level. And since the External Affairs Minister Jaishankar has a close equation with the Prime Minister on these issues, I think in that sense the elevation without any formal announcement as such to the ministerial level is therefore very, very interesting. It does suggest that perhaps the Quad is now getting into some kind of a more proactive grouping perhaps. We'll have to see how how that meshes with India's policy so far, but nevertheless it's interesting.
Yeah, India has been a very, very reluctant kind of participant in this grouping, and as I mentioned to you earlier, it was always at the Joint Secretary level, and whenever the MEA was asked whether it would be elevated to a higher level, they would always say no. What do you think you just said that it's basically with an eye on China that we might be doing it, but why the sudden jump?
You mean what triggered it?
Yes.
Yeah? Good question. I think there's been, if we look back at how the Quad has developed, maybe India has been reluctant to overtly support the Quad, terming all the meetings as consultations,
yes.
Avoiding any military connotations at all.
Yes.
Perhaps that is finally coming home to roost, although even now there's no talk of military, at least
yes.
None of the sides have, We'll have to wait when the meeting ends and what statement is issued. But until now, so far, there's been no overt suggestion by India of a military role.
Yeah, that's right. India has been very careful to say that there is no and military aspect to it.
For good reason.
Yes.
We have territorial disputes with China, and we have, I think only Japan has also a territorial dispute. But we share a land border with China. I think that complicates matters a lot. And therefore, they need to be more careful. That's a question I want to ask you at the meetings on Thursday. Broadly, what are the kind of issues they could touch upon?
Well, Surya, going by their past statements on these meetings, they've been quite bland, short, and quite cryptic. And they've been talking about things like humanitarian assistance. They've been talking about development. They've been talking about connectivity. But importantly, they've also been mentioning the Indo-Pacific. And this becomes very important, especially in the light of this whole Indo-Pacific construct. Though, again, Quad countries, especially India, is very, very careful to clarify that we should not conflate the Quad with the Indo-Pacific construct. And yet you find its mention in the statements of the Quad, and 3 meetings have taken place since 2017. The first one took place in November 2017. That was when the Quad was revived in a way, and 2 meetings then took place last year, and now the 4th one. So hopefully, well, behind closed doors, they might look at more strategic issues rather than just things like development and humanitarian assistance.
In fact, a short while ago, I was referring to the trigger. When you look back over the last year, China has been pushing fairly strongly in the South China Sea. The most notable example is, of course, Philippines and the issues over Mischief Reef, and Duterte has more or less indicated that his country is helpless. Then you have Vietnam. They have had a long-standing face-off, which is still continuing.
Yes.
And there is no indication that the Chinese are prepared to pull back. And then, of course, the issues of militarization of reefs and all that. So, I think there are enough triggers out there and I think the signal, there was perhaps agreement among the partners that China is not reading the signals adequately, and therefore the need to push it across even more firmly.
I think China is not going to be happy about it, though.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still important in diplomatic terms, to tell the Chinese where to get off.
So some clear messaging to the Chinese, really.
Yeah.
In this context, I'd also like to talk to you about the Malabar exercise, which has begun on Wednesday. Again, you have the US, you have Australia, and you have Japan taking part. And I remember that in 2007, when the exercise had taken place, China had not been pleased and protested when Singapore, for instance, was included in the exercise. And this exercise again, the naval exercise, is again seen as a way to counter China's growing expansionism in the region and its expeditionary tendencies. So where do you see the military aspect? Do you see a military element to this Quad, say, in the near future?
Well, if you look at it, closely, there are military alliances within. There is the Quad, and there are lots of bilateral and multilateral things going on. So Malabar has India, Japan, and the US together. Then India separately has a bilateral thing going on with Australia.
With Australia, Ausindex, yes.
And Australia and India are talking to Indonesia about security and maritime issues. And there's also this thing going on with separately with South Korea. So when you look at it, if you step back and look at it as a whole, there are all kinds of little networks over there, which perhaps in time could, if you join all the dots, it could be kind of a umbrella kind of network, bringing together diverse Southeast South China Sea states and Pacific states in an arc against China. So I think that is interesting.
I was just wondering what kind of fallout this ministerial level meeting could have on India-China ties. You see, President Xi Jinping is slated to visit India next month, and ties have been pretty good. You have the Wuhan summit, and then of course the Wuhan spirit prevailing thereafter. So, do you think that this was likely to have any impact on
the bilateral?
Yeah.
I don't know, when you look at it, there doesn't seem to be very much growth in the bilateral relationship, It's the age-old disputes that remain, and we keep adding new ones without resolving any. So earlier it was just border. Now you have CPEC, you have Pakistan, you have terrorism, you have the trade deficit, and China doesn't move 1 inch to resolve any, In fact, they say, I recall there was a meeting of think tanks over the weekend, and one of the academics from Shanghai said, India is not a strategic competitor, which frankly is rubbish. They are just trying to pull you down. But I think India has been pretty forthright in telling the Chinese that at meetings of this kind, unless you go forward to resolve issues, things could build up to a point where you could not be able to control what happens next. And right now, it's a kind of a cold war going on. Obviously, India doesn't want it to spill over into a hot war. But when you leave disputes unresolved, that question mark remains as to what will happen. So that issue is there. The other point I wanted to check with you is about Australia. We have been suspicious about the Australians, about their proximity to the Chinese. Any ideas? What's your sense of where this is going?
I'm not so sure. It's just the fact that India is keeping the Australians out because of their proximity to the Chinese. I think India is also keeping the Australians out because of, again, this fear that how will China react to it? Because India seems to be always sitting on the fence when approach to China is concerned. So we seem to take one step forward and then we take 2 steps backwards. So perhaps, and that's the sense that we've got from diplomats, that India is also keeping Australia out while having at the same time the Ausindex exercise, so that you don't seemingly appear to the Chinese as ganging up. So that's how India is playing the field right now.
But if you look at the recent exercises India and Australia have taken part in, pitch black, first time ever, that was a huge exercise. And there's also the naval drills that are going on. We are now part of that Five Eyes intelligence network. So there is a strategic thing that has already developed. We haven't formally said, we're all part of the same group as Quad and all that, but it's already there and up and running. So, like it or not, I think Thursday's confabulations in New York are going to be very interesting.
Yeah, now let's wait and watch and see what kind of a statement they come up with. Incidentally, all the four countries in the past have come up with separate statements.
Yep.
It's not like a joint statement that they've come up with. So really, we need to see and look out for what they say now, whether jointly or separately, possibly separately.
You never know, it's a ministerial level thing, so it could be different.
Yes.
Thanks very much, Parul.
Pleasure.